With me in the studios to discuss how prepared the federal government and various other stakeholders in this school reopening are is a professor of international law and global politics, Professor Jehu. You are welcome to Searchlight, Prof.
Thank you and good evening.
Also with us in the studio is Mr. Ken Onyekong, a public affairs analyst based here in Enugu. Mr. Ken, you are welcome.
Thank you.
All right, without wasting much of our time, I would want to know from Prof, when you heard the news of this safe reopening of school from the PTF on Monday, what was your reaction?
Yeah, it's actually a step in the right direction because it's something that's long overdue. The fact that the nation was placed on lockdown has orchestrated other forms of problems because the students have become redundant. They don't know what to do at home, and even they constitute a nuisance in the society because an idle mind is the devil's workshop, as they say. So most of them have left their normal academic pursuit to go about other things that are menial, that are not congenial to the social concretization of the society. Now, the reopening of a school is a good step which will enhance the emancipation of these problems that will result in a high turnout of graduates, especially the fact that those who are in the upper echelon of their studies are allowed to go back. Those who are going to write their WAEC, those who are aspiring to graduate from the different tertiary institutions, that will help to make sure that the job market is not depleted of the necessary graduates and graduates at the same time. So I believe that the government has taken the right step in the right direction.
Okay, let's hear from our colleague here. Mr. Ken, like you said, he has been expecting it, but ordinarily for you as a parent, were you, or did you think this should have come earlier than now, or this is the appropriate time to call these students back to write the exams?
Well, thank you. As my co-discussant here said, it is indeed long overdue, but the concern is whether actually we are calling these students back to school, whether we have adequately prepared for them, for their safety in their various schools, or are we just clamoring for reopening of schools for the sake of the students going back to school? Because if the concern is about having those that are graduating, the graduating students to sit for the examinations, the question now becomes, if they sit for the examinations and graduate, where do they go into? Will the universities absorb them? Will the universities be open to take the first year students? And those that graduate from primary school, will the secondary schools also be ready to absorb them? Because at the end of the examination, they will still have to go back home and sit at home. So because my own view actually is that government should find a way, because nobody knows actually when this issue of coronavirus is going to come to an end. So government should find a way to take every student back to school. There should be a strong measure that ensures the safety of every student in school. So that's what I feel about it.
All right, Prof, you have seen the concern our colleague raised here. What then do you think should be put in place first before the students comes back to write?
Very nice question. You see, this pandemic has become endemic, and we cannot sit back and do nothing because in the face of these ravaging effects of pandemic, the worst thing we can do is to stand and watch. Most nations of the world have adopted measures to live side by side with this pandemic because as we can see, the thing has gone viral, and most persons already are suffering from the coronavirus without knowing it, because some are symptomatic and while some are symptomatic. So for this reason, some have no evidence of symptoms. So that does not obviate the fact that they are already infected. So while we sit back and create avenues of living side by side with this pandemic, the necessary panacea will be to put the measures in place to prevent the spread. So I will be of the opinion that government should provide a lot of these PPEs, which students will have to use while going back to school, because health is important here. And while we want to sustain our economy as well as our educational system, we should also want to sustain our health first. So putting measures in place to prevent the further spread of this pandemic is very, very paramount.
All right. Mr. Ken, he has said government has to provide some personal protective equipment and items. But my question is, do you think it would be easy to make these students to adhere to all these safety protocols concerning COVID-19, knowing that these are teenagers, some of them are still children within the ages of maybe 12, 10, 12, and those in secondary school, maybe around 16, 17 years.
I bet you that actually is another serious challenge within the COVID-19 challenge itself. Because these children, you can actually judge from the fact that adults, several people in Nigeria till now, don't believe that the reality of COVID-19. Many people still doubt that COVID-19 is in existence in Nigeria. So if we have adults with this mentality, how much more? What do you expect? I mean, from the kids, from the children of primary and secondary school age. So that was why I said it is going to be a very serious challenge within the COVID-19 challenge. Okay. The teachers of the students are expected to be up and doing. Many of them also, they live within the normal populace. They also don't believe that the COVID-19 is real. So a teacher that doesn't believe that COVID-19 is real, how would such a teacher be able to protect the students and guide them properly that they don't witness a spread of COVID-19 within the period will allow the students to go back to school and within the age bracket of school children. So it's a very big challenge that the government and the teachers are expected to rise to such a challenge.
All right, Prof, you have heard him. It's going to be a challenge, but the safe school reopening has not commenced. What do you advise the Enugu State government to start doing now to be ready for these children and their teachers before they come back for
Yes, results? There should be collaborative effort on the part of government and students as well as teachers, because no person can do it alone. The government cannot do it alone. So they need the consult of the teachers as well as the parents who will help to educate their wards at home before they go back to these schools. Because you see, we have one understanding that no parent trains his or her own child alone. So there must be effort of government as well as that of the teacher in kind of consortium to allow for clear passage of information, which means people must be educated as to the spread, the mode of transmission of this disease. Because like he said, most persons are very skeptical about the existence of COVID-19 in Nigeria. But their unbelief does not make it to be unreal. The fact that COVID-19 exists is quite very clear to all and sundry. So for this reason, we need to inculcate this very clear information on the minds of people so that they will be aware of the danger, the imminent danger that will be inherent in the resumption of schools, so that they will put these measures in place before even going back to school. So government, the teachers, and the students have a role to play in this regard.
All right, Prof, one more question. Earlier you mentioned that some of these students may have become redundant when it comes to their academic activities, but some schools were using the online platforms to reach out to their students. Don't you think that may have helped the students to keep abreast with their trends and developments as concerned the academics?
Absolutely. You see, I will recommend that government will take the challenge here. The onus is on government to help to subsidize the cost of these gadgets, because you see, to do online education is very good, but what are the attendant problems that come with it? So it is necessary that government will subsidize the cost of the gadgets. It may be computer, it may be iPad, it may be any form of Android phone, but that alone is not what is required. You also need data subscription upon which to run the information that you'll be channeling through these platforms. So these subscription rates should be also subsidized for students, allow them to participate in the online education. Otherwise, we'll have a serious problem in our hands. So we want to say, because pandemic is ravaging, we'll now create a whole lot of students who have been shortchanged in terms of educational instruction. So I believe government should play a long and fast role in this regard to enhance the possibility of learning in a very virtual environment.
Okay. Mr. Ken, you are aware that Enugu State government is trying to keep these students busy with the academic works also explored the option of radio. Wouldn't you think that radio would be more effective in teaching the students virtually, considering what Prof has mentioned, the cost of the gadgets, the data, and maybe internet connection, poor internet connection in the country?
Yes, the use of radio to educate the students is commendable, and but the challenge there again is you realize when you go into a classroom in the primary or secondary education, you will discover that the teachers use a whole lot of things to maintain the attention of the students.
You're right.
So this is going to be lacking if we rely on educating the children through radio. But that is not to say it is the process is not effective. I'm only trying to highlight the few challenges so that if we're adopting a measure, we will be sure of the challenges and be sure of how to address such challenges. While we were waiting for this program to start, I saw a young girl, a student on the screen of your station, advising the government to make available face masks for them and hand sanitizers. So these things are very cheap actually, but there are families and there are students that cannot be able to afford them. These are the little things that actually matter in the fight against COVID-19. Governments and schools should be certain that these things are very much available for the use of the students, because as I said earlier, the issue is not actually just about having the students go back to school, but how much measures are we putting in place to make sure that they go back to school safely and come back safely. So there are a whole lot of works that are expected for the government and schools to do in this regard.
I don't know. Prof, looking at what we have talked about, the digital learning platforms, the radio also may not be very effective also. Don't you think that these students that will be returning may not be well prepared to even to sit for that exam? Looking at the emotional trauma COVID-19 has brought, the economic impact, and so many other things that may have, worked against their progress in the academics.
Yes, there are concomitant effects of the lockdown. Now, students will now go back to school. Then that level of malaise is there. We have been at home, we've been enjoying, we've been doing all sorts of social activities. Now we're going back to school. So it's like trying to adapt to a situation that has been very odd from the beginning. Now, but I have to also encourage the students, because most of them are online. They do chatting. So chatting is a form of learning, if you convert the chatting from social to academic. So they should use the same avenue they use for chatting to now learn, so that it be interactive. Because the difference between the in-person classroom learning and the one of virtual environment is because it's not interactive. But they can create the interactive nature by making it to be a chat. So you chat with your teacher, then the question and answer will now flow, through the same binary. So I believe that students can adapt, because they are young ones, and at the level of the tuition and tutelage, they should be able to adapt with these very changes that are already ravaging the world. Because we cannot sit back and watch, because the pandemic has become endemic, like I said, and we do not know when it will eventually be, curtailed, globally. So for this reason, we need to continue to look for ways and means to combat, as well as to live side by side with the pandemic, so as our lifestyles will be seamless.
All right, Mr. Khan, would you rather suggest that when the students return before sitting for the exams, they should refresh their minds maybe through revision of their previous academic course? Wouldn't you think that would be a better way of getting them prepared for these all-important exams?
That is absolutely necessary, because as Prof said, many students were actually not following up with the academic pursuit at home, while at home during the COVID lockdown. So if you just bring them back from home to school and only for them to sit for the examinations, certainly you expect very poor performance. So they have to refresh their memory. They have to, whatever they have been taught or learned, whether while in school or while at home, has to be retouched for them to be appraised with what is expected of them. Because to me, I have my reservations with this policy. I have said that before. If you insist that a child of a student of SS3 must go back to school to sit for an examination only because he is a graduating student. After that examination, is the school ready to take him into is school ready to take him into SS1? If the school is not going to take him into SS1 as a fresher, so what is the sense of having him or her back to school only to take examination and go back to stay at home? So my idea of this, or my view on this, is government and schools should make adequate preparations to have the students go back to school. All of them. What does it take? You have to sensitize and educate the teachers. Most of the teachers don't believe, as I said earlier, that COVID-19 is real. They have to believe, and they also have to learn how to help protect others. So if that is done, face mask and hand sanitizers and others have to be available in schools for students to go back to school. All of them. You don't need to take an S3 back to school and return him after 2 or 3 months of examination to stay back in school and wait for the total period of COVID-19 ravaging. So I find it very absurd.
Okay, let us hear from our university doc. Prof, can you help us identify what worked for some of these advanced countries? Because I know that even in this COVID-19, people are graduating, people are defending their thesis, people are progressing their academics elsewhere. But in Nigeria, it's standstill. Can you give us how these things are working there so that we can make long-term plan against future pandemics or disruption of learning?
Yes, in fact, like you rightly surmised, in the United States and Europe, where I've been lecturing, I discovered that most things have been going seamlessly. See, people have been studying, people have been passing their exams. Everything has been toned down to virtual environment, where people are eventually taught, and the process of learning continues to go seamlessly. So I believe that if it works for US and Europe and elsewhere, it should work in Nigeria. It's only a kind of political will to achieve that academic result.
All right, Mr. Ken, just briefly tell us your final advice to the students that are coming back to write the exams.
Yeah, my advice to the students is for them not to just wait at home for government to call them back to school. As Prof rightly said, the same time and resources we use to do social chatting, we should use the same amount of time to do academic exploits on social media.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for your interventions on Searchlight tonight. And I believe our viewers have heard it. For us to achieve safe reopening of schools and to avoid school transmission of COVID-19, all hands must be on deck. That is, both the students, parents, government, schools, and teachers have roles to play, and we must all play our parts. Thank you for being there on Searchlight tonight. Remember, Searchlight will still come your way the same time next week. Good night.